He's
Greetings, all.
recording. Everyone, throw up inappropriate gestures, quick.
Thanks, guys. Greetings, all. D&Disability here. This time, I'm bringing some friends. So let's just jump right into it. We're going to talk about monstrosity, what it means to play monsters, and of course, more importantly, how these guys handle monsters at the table, because I'm sure that's why you're here. Let's go ahead and tell me who I have. So, whoever wants to go first.
Hi, I'm Bill T. I'm with Paint Minis Live. I do a live show that's exactly what it says on the tin. I paint minis, I do them live. And I also do some light DMing and roleplay things as well. And that's basically about me in a nutshell.
I'm Harmony Ginger. Harmony_Ginger on YouTube, at GingerBlast on Twitter. And I just talk nonsense on Twitter, and I sometimes do things on YouTube. That's about it.
I'm Father Aaron, the Dungeon Minister. I have a YouTube channel of the same name where I recap our family game that I play with my three boys, speaking of handling monsters at the table, and my wife, and do some other stuff as well.
My name is Bill Sylvie. My online persona presence is the Dungeon Delver. I have a 5-night-a-week live streaming YouTube channel where I talk about classic tabletop RPGs. I do live plays of classic tabletop RPGs. I interview guests. I do interstitial videos about tabletop RPG news. And I also write and occasionally edit some physical TTRPG works.
You're actually about to be cited in my first publication here, Bill. Well, beyond my master's thesis. You're actually talked about in there as well, I believe.
Okay. Well, cool. This I'm sure it will be bracketed by this a-hole. So, I'm looking forward to it.
Believe it or not, your Tuesday night game, which I've been a part of, has been really informative as far as my experience of more general kind of OSR culture. So, because remember, my table is predominantly of players with disabilities, so we take a very different view of things.
Sure.
And I guess speaking of taking a view of things, we're talking about monsters, but I would be remiss to not talk about monstrosity, what it means, right? Because monstrosity represents the characteristics we as humans find unappealing, right? These are elements that mark us as abnormal, not only like as a gelatinous cube, a monster, but a unicorn is also a monster as well. So monstrosity isn't necessarily evil. To take kind of a general quote or general um definition here. This is from the University of Cambridge. What is a monster? Monster reinforces our conceptions of social boundaries of morality. Don't kill creatures we perceive as having human traits, like names or personalities. On the other, it offers the illusion of absolution from the underlying horror at what all of us are doing to the natural world. And their argument in question had this argument of, don't poach, don't kill animals, that kind of general over argument. But I think it's a good place to approach monstrosity from, and it's an interesting point that we as DMs, we play these monsters. We aren't just the heroes. We're not here to go out and necessarily slay them or do whatever, right? But we embody these monsters in a way. So I want to open today's discussion, today's kind of big topic, with how do we play these conventional monsters, right? How have we handled the quote big dumb monsters, right? The you can think of, say, the monsters of animal intelligence, or beyond the quote unquote low intelligence kobold or goblin or even the ogre, right? So these owl bears, hippogriffs, yada yada yada. So let's open it up there. How do we handle these low intelligence monsters as DMs?
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, as we were talking before before we started recording, earlier today we had one of our games, and the players fought a group of monstrous mushrooms, which were made by, I'm going to grab one because they're fabulous, made by Dirty Basement Terrain. So the idea came from the thing, but I mean, big dumb monster, that's it right there, right? Um, and how I played them today and how I always try to play monsters of the big dumb variety is they tend to be solely motivated by food or fear, aggression. And in the same way an animal would be. Like a bear isn't going to go out of its way to come kill you. If you're in its way, if you're potential food, but it's not going to go out of its way to come get you just to get you. So I do allow there to be monsters that just, oh, you see it, it avoids you, you avoid it. But once they've latched onto something, we just 2 days ago got a dog, and this thing is all about its nose and its stomach. And when Magoo smells something in the kitchen, he's off. And there's hardly any keeping him out of there, right? We're working hard on that one. So the motivation, once they latch on to food, and remember, this is what they absolutely need to survive. It's not like, I really want some potato chips. This is life. They're going after it, and they will not stop unless they're met with so much force that they like, oh, this is not worth it anymore. It's more likely I'm going to die that way than of starvation. So I tend to make it pretty mono-focused and pretty determined, put it that way.
A dumb monster is driven only by instinct normally, whether that instinct be to hunt, to run, self-preservation possibly, but really its decision-making comes all the way down to instinct. Something you said earlier that I thought was actually quite an interesting take was that we don't, let me see if I can remember your words. You said we don't kill monsters with human traits, but I don't think that's true. I think a lot of monsters are meant to personify some of the more undesirable human traits like wrath or greed or lust in the case of like a succubus or something like that. And generally, we would kill monsters like that, even though they do have some human traits. Like, for example, I believe that goblins represent like greed and wrath, and certainly you'd want to kill something like that.
And we'll definitely start kind of unpacking that and where this definition fails, right, when it comes to the sentient creatures. Yeah, you're right. Sylvie, you had an idea?
Yeah, I wanted to springboard off of what Harmony just said and what your opening thesis. And I want this is such a great little piece of text. It's page 5 of the AD&D Monster Manual, and Gary lays this down here, and he says the term monster is used throughout this work in two manners. Its first and most important meaning is to designate any creature encountered, hostile or otherwise, human, humanoid, or beast, until the encountering party determines what they have come upon. It is a monster. The secondary usage of the term is, in the usual sense, a horrible or wicked creature of some sort. And this goes right to what Harmony was saying. Thus, a monster is encountered during the course of a dungeon expedition, and it is discovered to be an evil high priest who just might turn out to be a monster in the other sense as well. Monster, at least in classic Dungeons and Dragons, is a blanket term that indicates an unknown entity, but not necessarily a wicked, a benevolent, indeed friendly and helpful sylph is classified as just as much of a monster, lowercase m, as a huge ancient red dragon who bears absolute and utter enmity towards a group of adventurers. But to address your point directly about smaller hordes of things, if we may, the sub 1 hit die types, that you typically find yourself running into in caves that are chaotic, or while you're out in search of the unknown. The smaller critters, they're I think well, yes, it's like Harmony said, they can represent very uh very oblique human traits: greed, wrath, uh just general evil behavior. And as far as running them, fortunately, most of the monster descriptions tend to give the DM, and again, I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons. That's my bailiwick. They tend to give a little bit of insight. Kobolds are stupid, but they're also noted to be very clever miners. So you got a little something to work off of there. You know that that kobolds might, as a whole, be kind of dumb, but they are going to have built deadfalls, pit traps, maybe mazy areas where an incautious party who's not bothering to tell you, the DM, that they're taking a very careful map, may find themselves trapped, running low on torches, food, and hit points. So I think if a DM does a little bit of homework, they will note that the lesser monsters of whatever stripe can be wickedly effective. I tell a story of an average third and a half level party that faced down and defeated a type 6 demon in AD&D. That's a Baylor, as they called them in later versions, a Balrog for our friends who don't regularly play D&D. That's a very low level party to go up against a threat like that and come away unscathed. They patted themselves on the back, congratulated themselves, departed the dungeon, and on their way out, they encountered 14 giant rats, and 2 characters were left conscious after that to drag the other 4 members of the party and their war dog to safety. Effectively used, smaller, even animal intelligence monsters in packs can be absolutely terrifying threats to a party.
And there's no truer kind of part of an AD&D experience there where they can kill one big scary monster of, beyond human intelligence, and then, die to many smaller, less intelligent ones, right?
Yep.
Go ahead, Bill T.
Well, I suppose a lot of the talking points that I guess one could talk about have already been taken, but I guess I'll elaborate in my own way on maybe the spectrum of intelligence, between talking about, natural animal instinct level of monster, and then you have all the way up to, like you're talking about, some, beyond human intelligence, and, even into divine intelligence. Um, when playing monsters and, presenting obstacles to our players, for me, it's always the most fun to find motivations that are unlikely. So maybe instead of an animal just honing in on the feeding instinct and just the food part of it, maybe it happens to be this animal's mating season.
Oh, yeah.
And you are, you are in the way of its, going to find a mate or something, or it just, for whatever reason, people in the village know that, this week in September, don't go outside because the mayflies will eat you, since they can't recognize, you from anybody else. It just finding other ways and more like interesting ways to present monsters uh, to players, that will make them think quite a bit differently, because a lot of the time we come up against monsters and big bads, and they're immediately hostile, and it's for, the original reason of food or territory or whatever. But if you mix it up a little bit, it creates a more interesting game. And for me, I'm very much so into the story part of it, so I enjoy that aspect of it. And I think that when we present monsters to our players. If we take all of those things that we kind of hit on, you meld it all together, you end up with a very entertaining playthrough for your players. If you take all of those things that have just been said, mix
Well,
it together.
that's where reaction roles come in too, because I mean, you never really know what you're going to roll for a monster's reaction. Like very recently I had and players encountered a black bear and I rolled a maximum reaction roll for it. So I mean, he was just a guy, you know. I think they might have tamed it and taken him with them for a while, but I think he left later, but still, I mean, there's a whole spectrum of interactions you can have with dumb creatures, and it's not just animals. It's, I mean, undead too, like zombies. Zombies, like they don't even have a survival instinct. They're not going to run away. They're just going to fight till they die, right? And I don't even do reaction rolls for them. They're zombies. But
I like with the undead the potential of they've been given something to do, and killing you isn't it. And so they'll just walk right past you like you don't exist. They don't care because they've been told, they've been, go fetch this, guard that. And unless you're actually stopping them, you don't exist for them. And so
Yeah,
you
if
get
they're
this horrible line of zombies walking by and they just don't even look at you, you know.
yeah, we see that in uh the island module based on King Kong. Um mm, Todd just used it in his in his game. Why
Oh,
am I
Isle of
blanking?
the Apes,
Isle
WG7, Isle of the
Isle of
Apes.
Dread. Isle of Dread.
Oh, okay. Well, then there's two. There's
Yeah.
Isle of the
Yeah.
Ape and Isle of Dread.
Well, Isle of Dread doesn't have King Kong in it, but like the whole module reads like King Kong. Um
Lost Island.
like that one.
in there is a whole like city that uses, and we see this again with the Synodicians as well, where citizens using undead as like a labor tool,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, to dig ditches, to run errands, to do just whatever, right?
Walk the dog, watch my
Some
kids.
sometimes literally, because I mean, they'll watch the kid unceasingly.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, they'll watch the kid walk straight off a cliff, but you know, they'll watch the kid.
In
Um,
my World of Greyhawk campaign, there is a small amusement park in the city of Greyhawk, and the rides, the merry-go-rounds, the things like that, nobody ever sees them, but they are powered by skeletons because
But
why
they're
not?
you have the undead working at the circus, at the carnival. How
they're the mechanism for keeping the rides running.
how is that different from the average carnival that comes through town? I mean,
I fewer tattoos on the skeletons, I think.
But okay, and those are some great answers about using, you know, low sentient, low intelligence monsters. And yeah, right, absolutely, Bill. I agree with you, Sylvie, for this. About monster and using monster not as almost the clinical term that monstrosity in academia might sometimes use. And to be fair, I mean, they're often looking at stuff like monster movies and books and that kind of thing,
Sure.
right? They're not looking at D&D. But that's where I think, you know, my channel comes in and our channels come into this discourse where we can say, well, wait a second, monsters aren't just whatever. And as the article said, a unicorn can be a monster, right? A unicorn is, and the
Sure.
original unicorns would straight murder people. If you
Yeah.
weren't a virgin, sorry, it's going to be a bad day for you,
Yeah.
you know? And so I agree. I like points here and I like the overall kind of discussion. The only thing I think I would add to it is my favorite non-sentient monster kind of does go into undead, but also oozes as well. Because sometimes they're there looking for food, but sometimes that food can be anything.
I'm
And my
I'm
favorite,
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
interject. The
Go
gray
ahead.
ooze in AD&D is intelligent and psionic.
Yes. Yes. But one of my favorite oozes is of animal intelligence. It's called the pink ooze, if any of you have heard of it. They
I have not.
slime
that was
people
in Ghostbusters 2, I think.
close. They slime people, and their slime is what is most attractive to whatever's around it. That's what it smells like. That's what it does. So it charms effectively whoever's around it to think that that person is the tastiest thing possible. This encourages your bears to eat you, your antelope to attack you, the nearby monsters to go after you, and then it just comes in and sweeps up the remains. It doesn't care if it's what it's slimed or not, right? Um, and it's an encounter that doesn't harm anybody. I've had players wake up, they get slimed, they let the slime move off, and they go, "Well, nothing happened. That was weird." And the slime just goes off and continues on about its day, and then that's when they hear the cave bear, you know? Um, so excellent. And this really does lead us into our discussion of, and I think Sylvie was kind of starting with this, and you Harmony as well, with the smart monsters, right? These are the smart cookies. These could be the elves, orcs, but also things like Nalfeshni, right? How do we find that in playing these monsters, even humans, right? Humans ourselves, we are the worst monsters of them all in a way. And how do we find playing them different? What stands out about us, beyond the reaction rolls and that kind of thing. But when we play those monsters, let's get your thoughts.
Well, first of all, they can be reasoned with and probably know when to retreat. Most of them won't fight to the death. On very rare occasions, they may. But they also will use pack tactics generally. One of my favorite monsters to use is hobgoblins. Um, they're well known for using military tactics, and I've terrorized players with hobgoblins for years. Um, but I mean, really, it depends on the monster because some of them have different tactics that they're known for. But I mean, in general, I don't want to steal everyone else's answer here, but in general, you can probably assume that they will have at least a preservation instinct, and the players can reason with them at least some of the time.
Absolutely, yeah. They're encounters where you're heading off to you've got some monster you're supposed to slay, a nest of giant spiders, and you come across some intelligent tribe that lives in the same area, tribe of troglodytes, whatever. You can reason with them and say, "Look, we could fight, or you could let me go, and I could deal with this thing, which is probably a problem for you as well, right?" And that's up to the monsters. Go like, okay, well, yeah, that's going to do me good. So they can overcome the instinctual response, and have a more nuanced encounter. And it can be. I mean, you mentioned the reaction table. I mean, sometimes I just let that lead because I want to see what the dice will do. Sometimes you want to play it and you want to judge what the players are giving you and react. But sometimes the reaction rolls can give you a very interesting story, a very strange, it's like your friendly bear, right? But it's not a bear, it's a bugbear. And he's just decided that, yeah, these guys don't look so bad today for whatever reason. Yeah, it could be a lot of fun.
I
There's
think a
this.
lot.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill. Go ahead.
I think with the smart cookie, there's just a couple of like levels of smart cookie in my mind. And I think back to the movie Alien, where you have this apex predator that's actually fairly smart, using the same as we were just talking about some of the big dumb and stupid monster tactics or like instincts, I guess, as its main generator of activity. But the way it goes about it is very, very intelligent. And I think sometimes those monsters are uh, they're very fun to interact with, and I think they bring a new level of challenge to players, as well as, I think a lot of this would go towards the big bad category, but the smart cookie of monster that could have the long play, so to speak,
Mhm.
where they're putting different pieces in motion or doing different things to get to a greater goal. Even if it isn't a humanoid creature, but it might be something else entirely but it's forwarding a plan. It thinks ahead. It thinks a step ahead of the players, or puts things in motion to bring its goals to reality.
So One of my favorite types of monsters to play that I don't get to play often, but it's really fun, is like an undead version of a monster that has like advanced tactics and spells, right? But the undead version doesn't have those, but it doesn't realize it. And so it'll try to like fight as if it were alive and like attempt to cast the spells that it might have had in life. But of course, it doesn't work. And it doesn't really comprehend now because it's undead, like what's going on. So you have like a very smart, advanced monster that has been reduced to like very little. A good example of that, I don't remember if this is in early versions of D&D. I know it's in like 3.5 and 5e. A good example is like a bone naga that doesn't have all of the spells that it had when it was a naga. But I don't know. That's just one. You made me think of it.
Bone Nagas are great. I have
Yeah.
Sylvie, you had a point, and then I have a point about Atu.
No, I was just going to bring up with the caveat that I don't really do quote unquote morality play in my D&D games. You know, I don't I don't I you know, 80 first edition AD&D for me is an entirely different thing from if I was running a game where I would do that. So I've never, I don't really do gotchas like you shouldn't have killed that monster. Don't you feel bad for having done that? If a party finds a group and they knew yourself have been part of this, you know, you slay the warriors and the women and you know the young and the female are not fighting; they're cowering in a corner. Um, some parties will let them go. Some parties will say nits make lice, and we're you know we're gonna do the thing here. And I you know I don't really I guess in general when we're talking about capital M monsters, I don't really care. But with that said, and I'm promise I'm not going down the let's talk about the morality of it road. We'll bring this back into how to play the monsters, intelligent monsters. There's a fantastic encounter that I love running in G1 Steading of the Hill Giant Chief, where if the party is going around kicking in doors in the various rooms in the upper steading, one of them is a room full of, well, there's 5 teenage female hill giants in the room. And a matron set to watch over them who is obviously cruel and nasty. And the description says that, you know, if the party goes in, the matron will move to attack, but the giant maidens themselves are likely to do nothing to aid her, and that was exactly the case. That's how I play it out. But Harmony pointed out great reaction rolls. You know, I did a reaction roll the last time I ran that scenario for the matrons, and you know they all had bruises and missing clumps of hair and split lips from her attitude, and so they just folded their arms and sat back and but realizing that the party was not there just to rough her up a little bit, I said, okay, how would a group of teenagers react if 12 armed people broke into their house, killed the person set to watch over them, no matter how wicked or nasty she had behaved? And I said, you know, they're in hysterics. They're breaking down, crying and begging for their lives in broken common and hill giantish. And that was all part of the reaction order. And I thought about them as a group of young women who were unarmed in their night clothes and backed into a corner in their bedchamber. So I think situation can dictate. If they had been out in the feast hall with Nosnera and his wife and the lieutenant and that sort of thing, and the giants had all started, you know, throwing their crocs and grabbing boulders out of their belt pouches and raining death on the party and, you know, forming up ranks and that sort of thing, they might have joined in with that, or they might have stood on a table and cheered on their elders or what have you. So I think it isn't, when you're talking about intelligent monsters, it is entirely situational, plus the reaction roll to see what they're going to do. If that had been 5 apprentice sorceresses all sitting there meditating and equipped with scrolls and wands and potions and rings and other sorts of nasty things, they might have just smirked at the party and then drawn down on them, thinking, well, these are easy pickings. So I think it's literally going to vary, and I don't feel you can just have a column marked all hill giants ever, and they all behave exactly that way. I think it's going to vary encounter to encounter, situation to situation. And I in the aforementioned encounter with the giant maidens, which it's area 11, I think, if anyone has a copy of Studying the Hill Giant Chief to hand. I've had parties go in and say, sorry, our marching orders are no hill giants leave this place alive. And the most recent run of it, the party leader stepped forward and said, you will remain in this room. You will stay quiet. If there's an alarm raised behind us, or we see you out of here until we come back and tell you you can leave, your lives are forfeit. They cleared out that section of the setting, went back and said, grab your stuff in this room and get out. And that was how they dealt with it. It's literally going to vary situation to situation when you're talking about highly intelligent monsters. I don't think there is any one single way to play them.
The other thing, though, if you're talking intelligent monsters, and back to Harmony's point about the hobgoblins, is that they're going to use tactics and they're going to try to outsmart the party. I mean, obviously, a black bear isn't going to outsmart the party. It might have an instinct that drives it in a way that you don't expect, like a tiger that has stealth and it sneaks up on you and it's camouflaged. But an intelligent monster is going to watch what you do and then adjust, right? Depending on the level of intelligence, childlike intelligence and up to, again, beyond human, but it's going to be able to see what you do and then adapt. And you have the job as the DM with an intelligent monster to try to outwit the players on behalf of the monster. And it's got to figure it out.
Excellent points. And Bill, Sylvie, I want to jump off of a point before I forget it. And then if anybody else wants to say anything, then I'll back off again. So Stang and Trammell, in their argument about the Ludic Bestiary, I'm not going into all of that today, guys, but I'm going to reference it later just as a kind of foreshadowing. They do talk about how in video games and in books and other media, like also D&D, where we have this absolute labeling of monsters as like all ogres are evil, all goblins are evil, whatever, right? And I've seen this in critiques by other academics as well, one of which I've guested on my show. Link here in the card if I actually remember to do this. Yeah, there. Yeah, sure. Okay. Anyway, so they give this critique that the book says all monsters are, all ogres are evil, therefore all ogres are evil. And you are one of the most classic grognards, one of the most Gygax only rules as written people I know, Sylvie.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking that as a compliment.
I take it as a compliment.
But even you there say, no, not all hobgoblins, or not all ogres or whatever, not all hill giants, whatever, can act specifically under this one table, right? In all situations, they're always going to act this way or whatever. And thank you for saying that. A, because I have it on recording now and you're forced to live with it forever. And wahaha. But B, more importantly, though, I think it really shows that one of my main points as an academic, we cannot take just what the book says and run with that. We cannot take D&D purely on a text basis. We have to take it on we as humans are the computers running the game, right?
Hmm.
And I think that that moment provides a very kind of it provides the perfect lens with which to view this question of, how does the monster behave, right? Which is ultimately at the core of today's video.
But in that attitude, I am hewing fairly close to the Gygaxian ideal of page 6 of the monster manual under the section for alignment, as it defines each uh, characteristic of a monster. Under alignment says alignment shows the characteristic bent of a monster to law or chaos, good or evil, towards neutral behavior, possibly modified by good or evil intent. It is important with regard to the general behavior of the monster when encountered, not the specific exact behavior in every single solitary case. So Gary does give us a degree of latitude, and in those circumstances, you know, that again, hill giants are chaotic evil. You look up their stats in AD&D. Hill giants are chaotic evil. 5 teenage hill giant girls just want to live. They're not interested in burning down a village and eating children, and gathering up all the treasure. 5 teenage hill giants sent here from a great distance away to be laymen for the hill giant warriors just want to live. In that moment,
Yeah, in that
their
moment,
alignment leans more towards chaotic neutrality.
in that moment, but they may very well want to attack the village and eat the villagers, but right now they can't. So they're not, there's a lot of different ways to be evil, right? I mean,
Sure.
chaotic and evil are pretty wide open. Even in that, ninefold description of alignment, that still leaves a lot of opportunity because obviously self-preservation and
Mhm.
opportunity, they might be biding their time. They might intend to raise the alarm when they're out of the room, right? I mean, all of those things can play into it. If you're dealing with an intelligent monster, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of layers to it.
Absolutely. And I think
Doing
complex layers is the ultimate and best two-word summation of that, Padre.
doing a follow-up video hosted by one of y'all, because indeed that's kind of what this is hopefully going to be, where we each take turns kind of hosting this kind of discussion. It can be more or less academic as we please, but I think revisiting this topic kind of and honing in on alignment could be a great topic for us to cover in the future. I think that could be very fun. Any other comments before I make my point about playing intelligent monsters?
Well, I think in my mind, monsters, and when at least when I'm going to the table to run a game for people, and my experience has been that monsters are a tool to sway your story in different directions. And just like Mr. Sylvie was saying, um, the uh, the situations that are going to be brought up in the game are so fluid, and so unique to different circumstances. And the way that you play these monsters, um, if you just think in your mind, how do I want this story to sway, or what do I want the players to feel within this situation? Do I want it to be melancholy and evil? Do I want it to be, um, heroic and, against all odds? Like finding the emotion and then tailoring your monsters to those emotions or the way that you want to sway your story. Um, they're very good mechanical tools for progressing your stories in different ways. So use them as such. Bring them in when things feel boring. Take them out when it feels too overwhelming. And also in the way that you play them. Maybe your big bad is just way too intelligent, and he's he's really putting up too many roadblocks, and the story has gotten to the point where it's monotony for the players because every turn that they take and every task that they do isn't fulfilling anymore. So maybe you have to hone that back and maybe present a different challenge to your big bad or whatnot to go and take care of while the players can actually make some progress. In my mind, that's kind of the summation of playing these monsters is bringing your story to different areas or different feelings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've played those kind of campaigns where it's like, well, well, heck, you know, and most of the people I've played with, they want to be heroes, right? They want to be the heroes in the story. Um, so they want to conquer evil. They want to save the innocent. Yeah, you do get parties of people who they want to play the bad guy. They want to play evil. But generally speaking, people want to be heroic. They want to do the big thing, right? The thing that they can't actually do in their 9 to 5 job because you can't grab a sword and take it to the bank and, defeat evil that way. It's just not how it works. But you do it in the game.
Yeah, right. Excellent points, all excellent points. As I said, I could see, there is so much you can say about playing sentient monsters, right? Um, my go-to story, I think, that sticks with my players. I'm a big narrative kind of DM, much in the same way Bill T is, and my players, they always quote back to me their interaction with three Otyugh and an Earthic. Earthic are like intelligent, omnivorous, kind of like psionic pterodactyls. Picture of them here, if I remember. If not, Google it yourself. And the party encountered these Otyugh, or Atu, if you prefer to pronounce it that way. I don't care. And they were befriended by these three monsters, complete with bad breath and offal and all of that. It was awful, literally. But they wanted this Earthic gone, and they were already on their way to go kill this thing. And they're like, "Yeah, sure, we'll show you where it is. We know where it is. It's way up on that cliff, and we can't get to it. So how about you get to it and throw it down. But we'll eat it for you. We'll get rid of it. It'll be fine." And they did exactly that. And for as much as they could, they made friends with these three Otyugh, at least for that very brief moment in time, you know? And I find it telling that after it's been a decade since that happened, and my players will still quote that story back at me, you know? It's those moments I find that they often latch onto and remember, where it is kind of the unexpected that happens. Um, and it wasn't necessarily intended. It was just their goals aligned.
Right. Yeah, you can have something that is it's still perfectly evil, but it's useful, or you might be useful to it as well. And an odd, well, politics and strange bedfellows, right?
Oh yeah, plenty of evil characters have had that, right? Where the party works with somebody that is evil simply
Hmm.
because they have what they, having parties as the archetypal example is like making your party of adventurers work with a lich because the lich can identify your magic items for you,
Right.
you know, and the lich will take the money. They want the money, sure, why not? You know,
Or
they'll
the
identify the magic items.
or the lich wants the dragon dead as much as you do for its own reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And dragons are they are a whole other topic. Well, before we continue with our program, I'd like to take a moment and show off a friend of mine's store. Folks over at Paint Minis Live have a bit of a readout for you. You use the link down below whenever you purchase something from them. Gives me a little kickback, and we'd greatly appreciate it. So please feel free, give them a check out and have a listen. And we'll get back to the program.
Unleash your imagination with paintminislive.com, where game night is a critical success. Elevate your RPG sessions with our curated collection of miniatures, paints, and everything you need to gather your friends around the table. We've got what you need to create epic adventures.
Plus, when you shop with us, D&Disability gets a share of the loot.
So level up your gaming experience at paintminislive.com, your one-stop shop for all things tabletop. We provide the fun, you provide the friends.
Well, all right. Welcome back. So we were steering our general topic of discussion toward, in a sense, kind of playing monsters, sometimes in subversive ways, sometimes not, right? And I want to take a moment and zoom in on that today before we conclude and move on to the kind of brief response to a specific element of the Ludic Bestiary. Because that's really how I want to end the discussion today is really working with under this umbrella term of playing monsters kind of subversively. What do I mean by that? I mean, has anyone here played a monster as helpful or friendly to the party? I know the example of, like, say, the charmed bugbear or the hill giants that we just gave, and there are others. I just indeed gave one about audio. But what I mean is, like, not in a scenario where the monster was magically controlled, nor one where the monster was planning to betray the party. We see this all the time in classic dungeons, right? Where it's like, yes, evil monster A will work to subvert evil monster B so he can become, lord of the tribe or whatever. And then immediately, as soon as he becomes lord of the tribe, he goes and he backstabs the party because that's fun. Um, I hope you can hear the sarcasm in my voice there, because that's not fun.
Yeah.
At least I don't find it fun. So, what are your thoughts, y'all?
I think it can certainly be done. I've done it many times. I'm like struggling to think of like how many. I know we have in my campaign right now a friendly revenant who his goals kind of align with the party, so they sort of are trying to help him get back an artifact that he lost. I think I might have stolen him from something, but I can't remember what it was. But like, I mean, dragons are a big example that I think most people, I want to say, most DMs have probably used a friendly dragon. Like, but I mean, it's kind of that's the easy one, because I think in most editions of Dungeons and Dragons there are like I believe it's based on color. There are like good and evil dragons. So I mean, that's really the cop out answer. But I mean, certainly a lot of times it's really hard with like very dumb monsters like undead and oozes. I mean, I remember once I was playing in a game and the DM had like this sentient ooze that was like actually extremely friendly. I believe it was a gelatinous cube. He was fun. He was like everyone's favorite NPC, was just this random sentient gelatinous cube in a dungeon. But you can do it with all sorts of monsters. It's just really hard to do it with the dumber ones that are driven by instinct, I think.
No. But the thing about the dragon too is that they can look at humans as being utterly beneath them, so they don't really need to compete with them. It's like having a pet, right? You're not in competition with the budgie. The budgie's just something in a cage, makes pretty noises every once in a while. So there can be a friendliness based on the fact that we're beneath their contempt. We don't need to be. They don't need to worry about us. Um, I had, of all things, and I say of all things because I know there was a specific conversation about these creatures very recently that happened on Twix. Um, my party came across a gnoll that was on guard duty but had fallen asleep. And so they disarm the thing, and they take the spear away, surround it with their weapons out, wake it up. And of course, it's terrified. And they end up sparing its life. And it, due to a reaction roll, it from then on was friendly to them because they'd spared its life, and they had, they had every possibility of killing it, but they didn't. And they actually ended up with one of my boys. His character was teaching the gnoll basic math, and it's trying to figure out how to add up and things like that. Because I play them relative like high school bullies, not hugely smart, horribly violent, treacherous, but this one ended up being their sort of friend. And I think Bill, you named him Chumley at one point. Bill Sylvie, you named him Chumley.
Yeah, Chumley the Knoll. Yeah, I
Chumley the friendly
remember
Knoll. Yeah. And
That's cute.
he was interesting because he was so utterly unlike all the other gnolls, right? I mean, like the difference was the point. The strangeness of it all was the point.
One of my I think one of the tragedies of Dungeons and Dragons from Supplement 1 Greyhawk to modern times is everyone's tendency to have mimics are just treasure chests that immediately try to eat the party. And this goes into the friendly monster, because the listing for mimics in the monster manual, third reference today, I'm 3 for 3, says there are two varieties of this creature: the large 9 to 10 hit dice, semi-intelligent, carnivorous killer mimics, and the slightly smaller intelligent sort. While the former will attack anything which is nearby, the latter are generally friendly if offered food. And then it goes on a little bit later. The killer mimics do not speak, but the other breeds have their own language and can usually speak several other tongues, such as Common or Orcish, etc. For consideration, they will usually tell the party about what they have seen nearby. And I have put more than one friendly mimic in my own Dungeons of Castle Greyhawk. The first one a party ever encountered, I said, you know, as with many rooms here, the ceiling is slightly wet. It's dripping. There is a medium-sized barrel in the corner that is collecting the water, and they're all just kind of roaming around the room looking for secret doors, looking for, probing for loose stones in the floor. And I said, while you're all doing that, from the corner of the room, you hear, "Nope." And everybody goes back over to the barrel and somebody chances to look in. And I said, the water level is considerably lower. And as you're standing there looking at it, the top of the barrel puckers in and smacks and says, "That's very refreshing." And of course they drew their weapons and prepared to do battle, but the mimic begged off and was like, "No, no, no, I was just getting a drink. I assumed you were all here waiting for your turn under the water drip. It's quite delicious." So they had a conversation with a mimic, and the mimic was more than willing to chat them up. And bless its amorphous heart, it said, "Well, I'd like to accompany you and see other parts of this vast underworld." And I said, you hear it grunting and straining, and then it kind of hops into the a horrid, like, child's drawing shape of a human body and stretches out what you presume are its arms, and it says, "See, I can look just like a person."
I'm
Nice.
reminded of that cartoon, that comic of the adventurer finds a chest and he's about to open it, and there's a woman chained to the wall, and she says,
Yeah.
"Don't, that's a mimic." And then of course she turns out to be a mimic as well.
Yeah, and the chest mimic is like, "Damn it, Charlie, that's a third meal I've lost this week." And
Stop.
the one mimic says, "Hey, evolve or die.
Yeah. Stop eating my lunch.
Stop eating
That
my lunch."
it's funny that you talk about mimics. In my game just a few weeks ago, I had a wizard's door puzzle. Leave a comment if you'd actually like to see what it is. I can do a short about it. But anyway, I had a wizard's door puzzle where the wizards of this tower had trained to keep their basement safe. The last door between the catacombs under the tower and their tower base to stop the college kids from getting in was a 5-door puzzle, and each of the doors was a mimic. So if you answered wrongly, they were trained to just bite you, not kill you, but just bite and go back to being a door, right? Just as a no, wrong. You don't belong down here. You clearly don't know the password. Go away, right? And the party got a kick out of that.
I think one of the my first time DMing for a larger group of people, and especially newbies, because I'd done a little bit of DMing for various groups, but this was a very fresh group. They had no clue, and it was their first experience with D&D or role playing in general. I devised my own little homebrew squirrel-esque type of creature, very small. As they would live in colonies, and their intelligence would grow a little bit when their numbers were larger. And the player that first discovered these creatures ended up falling into their hole. They live in like a hole type of city where it's like a 12-foot hole, and then they all burrow into the walls, and that's where they live. So they were stuck in that hole. There was no way out. So they were trying to reason with these creatures. Eventually, they ended up just having to give them all of their rations, and the creatures helped them out of the hole, but then just kept following them because they knew that this person had food. So they ended up with about 30 of these squirrel creatures, that became very close companions of them until one of their party ended up suffering a grievous injury, and they sold him to a circus. But they were helpful. They could have turned on the person too. The dice didn't roll that way, but there's always a good spot to be had for the friendly creature that's in the world. It brings a lot of like comic relief to the story, I think. Well, not maybe not comic relief totally, but just relief from everything being either an NPC that you're interacting with or a hostile entity as well. Just something that you discover, and I think it makes very novel memories for players. The friendly monsters in the dark.
One of my favorites to use is in a lot of large dungeons, I always have to have like an explanation for why this place is reset when you're there. So it's either like goblins or boggles or kobolds or something that have to like go around and reset the traps and stuff. And
Skeleton
the
maintenance.
players, yeah, the players will like come across the maintenance crew occasionally, and they're not hostile. They're just doing their job, right? So
Stan, little name
yeah,
tag.
yeah, they've had name tags before. I mean, and like a lot of times the players will like see them before they even notice the players are there, and they'll be like grumbling about like, I can't believe this guy bent these bars to get through. Now we have to put them back. And so I always like the maintenance crew for like the friendliest monsters, and they're not friendly so much, but they're not going to attack the players. They're just more grumbling about how destructive they are and how they have to reset all this.
They won't attack that. They have a union, and that's not their job.
Right.
It's not I don't do the attacking. I just do the fixing.
Yeah.
I think there's a show I think on Netflix called Delicious in Dungeon. It's an animated show.
Yeah, that's a
But
good
they
one.
they have a very cool way of resetting dungeons, and this could be part of the friendly monster thing too, where um since the dungeon is in a cave or in a particular environment, microorganisms grow there that have a repetitive memory, and they constantly rebuild damage or clean up,
No.
uh, the entrails of things. That as people have progressed through it, it's just their nature to rebuild their colony. They're like little microorganisms. I don't know if that's totally friendly, but uh, it's definitely another way that you could have monsters appear in some fashion of that to spice up your game too.
Well, it doesn't have to be friendly, though a lot of academics, Stang and Trammell included, not a lot, but because trust me, academia and game studies, not a very large field guys. Like if you want to make money, don't go into game studies. It's not an actual field, it's a subfield. Anyway, but like of the ones that have talked about this problem, of which I can think of like four, a critique is violence in the sense, but it's not necessarily non-violence is the answer. I mean, one of my favorite examples come from basic fantasy of all places, and they're cat spiders. They look like a spider, they look like a cat, like a kitten, when you first see their head, and their head's what of course shows up first, and then you realize, oh god, there's big hairy tarantula legs underneath it. But there's this moment of, oh god, look, they're so cute, and then, oh my god, what is that thing? um so in a sense, like, that's a subversive encounter, right? Because it looks one way when it starts, and you go, oh, I want to pick it up, and then you look at it and you go, oh, I don't want to pick that up, that's awful. um but like, my players have used kobolds as an example to start entire revolutions, because
Mhm.
kobolds are so often used as slaves. And so they had them rebel against their lizard folk masters, their lizard men masters, and lead a revolution, which didn't
That's a
go too
great
well
idea,
for
and
the
I'm totally
kobolds.
stealing that next time I
Well,
play.
they also used a cannon to break down the front door of the dungeon in question, so you may as well take that one too. But great encounter. Little kobold screaming revolution and peeking out my mic. Um, but yeah, it was great. I got to channel my inner Karl Marx for all of like a half hour of D&D. It was really funny.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
And
I I enjoy the subversive encounters. They're some of my favorites, actually.
it's good to hear, right? Because so often we think about like just violence and creatures as being hostile encounters, but not. Also, is it just me, or should elves be evil more often than we think they are?
Drow.
Not just
Oh,
drow. I mean, just regular, like just regular elves, because of the alien mindset. Like the
Well,
average human would be like, "Oh, you want me to work for you for the next 80 years of your life?" But you're not. You wouldn't care. I'd be dead. Like,
Well,
and the elf goes, "Yeah, so."
the alien mindset, but also the fact that because they're a playable character, and you can choose your alignment, you could play a chaotic evil elf. They would have the same range.
Absolutely.
They would have the same range of alignments as a human would have.
Mhm.
You know, all of the demi-humans. You know, I think that's actually one of the things for me that separates the monster classification from the character classification, is that you assume that the monsters have a fixed, you know, that they are, as you said, that hill giants are chaotic evil, and they may
Mhm.
behave different in different situations, and they could still have friends, and chaotic evil doesn't mean you have no friends, but they're going to have a trend toward a certain behavior, chaos, etc. Whereas the playable races, the playable characters, it's wide open and you pick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you could have a bunch of completely wicked elves, completely evil. Okay, have a bunch of halflings who are just a bunch of bastards, just want to kill everything they see, you know, and
I mean,
that would be reasonable within the rules of the game.
at the
I
end of the
Dark
Lord
side.
of at the end of the Lord of the Rings, when the hobbits return to Hobbiton, there are some hobbits who sided with the half orcs
Yeah.
that Saruman brought to wreck the Shire with.
Yeah.
And one could make the argument that Lobelia Sackville Baggins and her associated family were, I don't know that you could classify them as evil, but they certainly weren't nice
No.
by any stretch of the imagination. The painting that Tolkien creates for us with words about how hobbits are these genial, outgoing folk, and you could just walk up and knock on somebody's door and say, "Mind if I come in for tea?" And that's certainly, that mold is broken with her.
I
So
I I have the feeling that Lobelia was someone very particular.
yeah,
That of all the
I
characters, that's the one that Tolkien knew this person.
I don't think
Well,
you're wrong, Padre. I
I've
don't think you're wrong.
I've always really enjoyed the idea of evil elves just because of their lifespans and the fact that I believe there's literary precedent for them being based on the sin of pride. And I've always loved the idea of exploring elves from a human viewpoint, really, because we don't know their motivations. Because humans think ahead like maybe 20 years. Humans think ahead like 20 years. Elves think ahead like 200, 500 years. And so a lot of times we don't understand their motivation.
That's a good point though about their spans of planning and just how um that would definitely come into play in many ways in a campaign. It very well could, where finally big events are happening, but you know the party, and even in their lifespan, hasn't seen what's been happening in the background, and they get pulled away, and it could be a great excuse for a one-off adventure. A wizard who's finally saying that, oh man, these three things that they've been working on for the past 150 years are all coming together, and it's going to be cataclysmic for somebody. Come with me, we got to do this now and stop it. Otherwise, this big plan that they've been cooking up is going to happen. um it could be a great way to pull people to a one-off adventure, instead of having, if you want to slow roll your narrative a little bit, and just have a night of shenanigans.
I mean, when you think about it, I think elves are wonderful villains just because how long does an empire last? Like 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, something like that, generally. An elvish lifespan is much longer than that. So, really, I mean, if you have like a new country come up that needs aid, elves, do they really help? It's like, you're fleeting,
you'll be
you're nothing
gone.
compared to us, right? Um, by the time this matters to us, you'll be long gone, so we don't care. Like that's why I've always enjoyed the idea of elves as villains. Um, But that's
Well,
just a personal thing. Go on.
no, I agree. I agree. And in my home game, you don't the elvish kingdoms necessarily are very separate from the rest of the world. They have their long-standing alliance, their long-standing treaties, but that's it. And it's because everybody's afraid to deal with them because they're not going to collect from you. They're going to collect from your grandkids, right? So you're not signing your mortgage for today's prices, right? Your house, as an example, might be worth, to use like a modern economy, $500,000 or something. Well, who's to say that it's not worth twice that in 2, 3 generations, right? And that's the price they're signing for because they're projecting ahead, right? Um, but I don't know. Yeah, I enjoy thinking of that human perspective, right? And getting back to zooming into this is how your characters think of these people, monsters can be people, right? To use once again the original Gygaxian term,
Mhm.
right? And so to kind of wrap up what I see here, it's getting into kind of the final point before we get into concluding thoughts. I think while we may, broadly speaking, quite infamously, at least on my channel, disagree with Stang and Trammell's arguments about the Ludic Bestiary, I do think there's one element that this video has taught me, this discussion has taught me, and I'll read the entire quote, but I'm going to zoom in on the one element that I think I agree with. So, just for context, their quote, and you can go and look up their article citation in the description if you want to read it yourself. But the quote is, could the ludic bestiary become an instrument of inclusivity? Could we imagine monstrosity that celebrates difference instead of marginalizing it? Could we move away from a hypermasculine xenophobic version of the human hero, quote unquote, and orient ourselves toward a new understanding and appreciation of the monster? And I think the part of that quote that I can most certainly agree with, and their overall argument, I think, is that gender and monstrosity go hand in hand. But it's that could we imagine monstrosity that celebrates difference instead of marginalizing it? And I think that our discussion today does confirm that in a way that while certainly not all of the time, or even a majority of the time, D&D is unique among RPG systems and fantasy systems because we're given so much more option. Literally, the sky is the limit when it comes to option to celebrate these differences, to use monsters subversively, to use them, or to use them in ways that maybe aren't always indicative of their de facto alignment, right? And I hope I'm not putting words in anybody's mouths here for saying that, but I don't know. I don't think it's nearly as negative a situation as some might believe it to be.
No, not at all. And I at once reject and embrace that quote um from Stang and Trammell.
We all do, Sylvie. We all do.
Because the the fact of the matter is a good dungeon master will look at each encounter as a unique opportunity. Now, I will say, and again, I think all of you to a greater or lesser extent. Unfortunately, I don't think Bill, have I run a game with, I know you and I have played in a game together, but I can't remember if you've played in any games I've run. But
I don't think so.
when you're straight
Not
up doing a home invasion on orcs to stop them from burning down the keep, from whatever, and you're just kicking in doors and doing what needs to be done, there's not a lot of stop and ask orc number 837 sitting over there, were you gonna throw that axe at me, or do you want, but by and large, when you've got some breathing room, when you encounter the sleeping Knoll, who actually turns out just to be a guy who wants to try out for the basketball team in the local Y, the whatever it is you run into, and the DM's got some breathing room and the players have got some breathing room. D&D practically orders you to make things a little bit different, once you've stepped back away from the sword and board chainmail approach of, let's kick monsters and collect gold coins. Both are 100% valid forms of play, and both are possible sometimes at exactly the same time, in exactly the same breath, from players and DM. So that's my feeling on that quote. I'm going to stop talking now.
I think that with monsters in general, and just with, well, I guess to bring it back even further, the game in general is so open-ended. It's like a hamburger. You can put anything on a hamburger. Well, mostly anything. It depends on your views on pickles, but um, the the game itself is so open-ended that you could definitely go ahead and celebrate all of this difference. Why not have a world where, almost Mad Max-esque, where if you're not mutated or messed up in some way, you're now the outcast. And you can definitely go down that road of celebrating differences, by having literally everything be different in that world. There's nothing stopping you from making your heart's desire in a role playing setting, and I think that's what sets tabletop gaming and role playing apart from any other experience that could be had, or at least any experience that could be had in modern media today, because it's so organic and open ended. So you could definitely go down the route with what they're saying here in this quote, and have it be a place where uh, differences are celebrated in non-human ways.
All right, let's have Harmony. Let's go ahead and have you finish up before we
Oh,
get any
yeah, I
any
apologize.
other comments, because you said you had to go, right?
Yeah,
So,
I'm
yep,
gonna have to get out of here, guys.
go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. You all have a great rest of the video. It's not stream, right? No, it's not stream. Um, but yeah, it was a wonderful discussion. Thank you. All
Sure. All right, take it easy.
right.
Thanks for coming
Bye.
on. All right. Any final thoughts? Actually, that's actually an excellent point. All right, any final thoughts before we conclude?
I, my sense on the monster is that in terms of its use culturally, it's to address the things that frighten us, that make us fearful by putting it outside of ourselves, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can go and kill it where you can't kill the person who has this trait. And it deals with group justice. It deals with the collective need for security by dislocating it from the human, and we can chase after it. And then you come into a metaphorical space where you are conducting a war on this trait, this, and not a trait, even this reality, this brokenness, this whatever. Um, and so on the one hand, I stick up for monsters are evil, right? The evil monsters are evil because of that abstraction. That is there intentionally, that um, we not try to humanize too much the things that are meant to be monstrous, because it has the knock-on effect of uh, treating with the things that are evil, right? And beginning to humanize the things that we ought to be expunging from ourselves. I think that it serves a role in fiction and narrative. And there's a difference between heroic search them out, uh, kill the bad guys kind of stuff, and modern psychological. I mean, and I think the most stark example of this is Tolkien and George R. R. Martin, right? The idea of, well, what was Aragorn's economic policy? Who cares? That's not the type of literature he's writing, you know. And so that said, there is place for the game that is full of all this subtlety that the Knoll can turn out to be a nice guy. I'm not so sure about the varsity basketball team, but the Knoll can be the nice guy. The Ooze can be friendly. Um, there's a place for all of the gray shades, right? It's doing something very different, and it's not better or worse. It's not a but it's from, like Screwdriver and Hammer. They're doing two different things. It's not a judgment call on them, but it's doing something very different from orcs are evil. Flat out, they're evil. You're not going to find a good orc. So yeah, nits make fleas kill them, because nits make lice kill them, because what else do you do with evil? You have to kill evil, right? I've heard it compared to cancer. Like if you went to the doctor, you had cancer, and the doctor said, you know what, we got 90% of the cancer, but 10% of it was okay, so we left it there. It's like, no,
That's
no,
not how that works at all.
not at all, right? You gotta get it all. So yes, did Aragorn go around killing orc babies? Absolutely, and it was the right thing to do. In Tolkien, George R. R. Martin, nothing's right, nothing's wrong. There is no right or wrong. It's all just power. It's a totally different story. So
Well, and even with Tolkien, not to push back against the Tolkien example, being a Tolkien a file, really, I would be a scholar if they accepted my work, and I don't feel like writing another paper to try and get published again. Um, they, I'm not bitter. Uh, they like Tolkien himself grapples with that very morality of, are orcs redeemable? Are some
Mhm.
orcs,
Mhm.
not evil, etc. And he kind of, if you look into his letters, he ultimately concludes that while they are evil, they are not beyond redemption.
Yeah, well, and,
And
and that's his theology. There has to be the possibility of redemption.
yeah,
When
It's
Sam,
a
I'm sorry, go ahead.
it's a feature of, because it has to be choice, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it has to be. I think the thing with York is they always make the choice to be evil. Like, they could be redeemed, but they won't be.
But as long as it's clear that
Satan could
there's
be
that
redeemed.
choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Satan could be redeemed. He won't be, but he could be.
yeah.
I will conclude with this, since we're talking about my favorite fantasy author, and my favorite fantasy book by him is The Lord of the Rings. But the there's an absolutely utterly moving moment, and when Frodo and Sam are passing through Ithilien, and the Rangers, led by Faramir, set up an ambush for Southrons who are going to the Morannon to join forces with Sauron's amassed armies. Um, one of the Southrons is cut down very close to where Sam is hiding, and he falls dead in front of Sam. And Sam looks at him, and it's not a moment of contempt. Sam doesn't draw his knife and finish him off, and he stabbed him just to make sure he wasn't going to get back up. Sam looks at him with pity, and says, because he just sees a man, and he says, or he ponders to himself, was he wholly evil? Was this man a monster? Or was he deceived
No.
by Sauron? Was he deceived by an agent of Satan and brought here leagues from a home where he would have been happy? Did he have friends? Did he have family? Did he have loved ones who would never see him again? Sam ponders all this in the heat of battle. He looks at a lowercase m monster, but does not see a capital M monster lying dead before him. And it is a very sobering moment when you realize, in the midst of sword and daring do and grand epic battles, clash of armies, here is a simple peasant farmer, and here is someone who could be anything in the world and has died in front of him. And it you can tell the impact, the way Tolkien writes it. And I wonder, I wonder if the professor, having been through the hellfire of the First World War, didn't look on fallen Germans with that same sobriety. These are not capital M monsters.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and there's the big difference between the orc and Sam, right? Like Sam has the capacity to do that.
Right.
He has that in him.
well, and there's a scene even in Lord of the Rings as well. And it gets to this point about monstrosity as well, where the orcs, from the Hobbit perspective, human perspective, etc., are evil. Um, they still care for Merry and Pippin. There are Uruk-hai that die defending Merry and Pippin, because not because they like them,
No.
but because it's their job to transport them healthy and whole and fit, right? Unspoiled is their word, right? Um, and when we think of the orcs that way, that is, in a sense, as far as the players might be concerned, in a D&D sense, a positive reaction role, right? Them simply not letting their friends go and butcher them because it would be fun, right? Those are the purely evil orcs. And then you have the others who are like, wait a second, we have a job to do, right? And their law is outweighing their chaos in a way. Right. And
Right.
that's also the big tension between, say, the Uruks, the Uruk-hai, and the orcs, right? And orcs and goblins, of course, being the same thing to Tolkien. So he even sets up differences and tensions within his own ranks of evil as well. So even with Tolkien, it's not all one brush, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And any
Gentlemen,
other oh, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, I do have to depart, and I apologize for dropping, but this has been an absolutely enriching and insightful chat, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Thane, for inviting me today.
Of course. All right. And of course, your link to your channel will be in the description. Of course, catch me on his live stream on Tuesdays-ish, whenever we get those running again. Um, Dungeon Minister and Bill T, do you two want to give your outros as well? I know we already said, who you are and kind of what you do, but if there's anything else that you'd like to point out, just, go ahead.
After you.
No, I think I shut my mouth off enough tonight. Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. I've
Right on,
got some
coming.
good ideas I'm going to steal from the other DMs, so that's all good.
That's for good.
Right, right. And yeah, thanks again for thanks for having us on, Thayan, and feel free to come over and check out PML. Both Thayan and Dungeon Ministry here are affiliates of PML. We've got a web shop to go and check out, and if you want to support them, you can get some physical items in return, to help support creations like this.
All right, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime soon. Somebody else will pick the topic, and you guys can host.
Cool.
All right, sounds great.
All right.
All right.
Well,
Bye, everyone.
with that all, this has been Monsters and Monstrosity. So with that, take it easy.